Hello, and welcome back to my channel. So it has come out initially through a Billboard article, and then most of us found it on Twitter, but it has come out recently that a lot of the music execs at these major record labels are depressed and struggling because they're in a tough spot right now because they're not exactly sure how to break new artists. And of course, they're saying they're stressed because the last really big names they've been able to break into the music industry are artists like Olivia Rodrigo and Ice Spice. And for a while now, and within several videos, I feel like I've touched on this concept of why don't artists want to sign to major labels anymore? Why aren't there as many just iconic, legendary, massive musical artists anymore? And why does it seem like they're starting to fade out? And the ones who are still big nowadays have been big for over a decade or so at this point. So a lot of you guys had asked me to touch on this topic today, and I'm more than happy to, because I do think it's sort of the culmination, if you will, of a lot of things that we've been talking about and noticing in the music industry. So let's go ahead and get into the video. This news initially came from a Billboard article written by Elias Slate. In it, he discusses that the music execs are struggling because the industry no longer knows how to break new acts. A quote from the article reads, "Each person I talk to in the industry is more depressed about this than the person I talked to before them." A lot of labels obviously thought social media, especially TikTok, was a new goldmine to scout talent. The idea was they could take someone who already had a viral song, sign them to the label, and then more or less coast off of that virality. But having a viral song, or even several, doesn't necessarily mean success outside of social media for the artist. For one, half the time when a song goes viral, people don't even know the name of the song, especially if it's one they were introduced to through TikTok. Likewise, they may only know the chorus or the viral part of the song and be unfamiliar with or even disinterested in the rest of the song. Also, a lot of the time with the viral social media songs, people know the song but have no idea who the artist is. I would assume it's rare that people hear a song on TikTok and run to Spotify to look up the artist. It's something I don't think I've ever done, but I would be interested to know if you have. There, of course, are anomalies like PinkPantheress, where the artist does blow up and end up signed to a label and doing well, but those cases are pretty rare. Another person I can maybe think of is Gayle, but I'm way less familiar with her career, so I'm not entirely sure. And of course, labels did start to turn to social media because that's where a lot of people are finding their entertainment and their new music these days. But the ability to create a song that goes viral on an app takes some talent or knowledge, yes, but that doesn't translate always to star power or stage presence. And also, often unbeknownst to the public, a lot of these people going viral who do end up famous were already signed to a label and just sent to TikTok to market. Speaking of star power, yes, often charisma is a little bit innate, but artists can also improve their stage presence through consistent development and training. And it seems like artist development is going down the toilet these days. We've also seen cases where artists don't start to take their stage presence seriously until they start getting attacked for it, and then they go to the classes and the boot camps to develop their skills. And yes, realizing you need to improve is way better than continuing to give lackluster performances, but the fact that some of these artists get to book such large stages without being ready is a problem too. This reminds me of that performance that Maya the Don gave a couple weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure it was at Rolling Loud. A lot of people were clowning her for not having a packed crowd like she's Beyonce or someone who has been in the game for years and years. Those smaller stages are where artists actually develop the skills and the presence to command larger stages, and there's no reason to expect someone who's more or less just getting started to have all the fans in the world. But I think we're also just not as used to seeing artists grow organically anymore, which is interesting because with social media, we really do have the ability to follow an artist's journey from the beginning now more than ever. But also because of social media, everyone not only feels entitled to criticize something that's part of the process, but we're also expecting to see someone who's already made it because social media is basically a highlight reel. But if this was even 20 years ago, your faves would be performing at the mall or in nightclubs in those first few years after they break, not, oh, I had my first hit song last year and I'm on a Coachella main stage this year. Because now, let's say you are genuinely talented or even just have potential, but you have a huge social media following. A lot of labels, venues, promoters, what have you, have been using that to allow artists to sort of expedite the timeline in which they get these big TV spots and appearances, assuming it's worth it as long as that person's followers tune in. But now a lot of these labels and promoters are realizing an artist having 10 million followers doesn't even mean that 5 million people are going to buy a ticket or even turn on a TV or open a phone app to watch them if they don't feel the performance is worth it. It reminds me of some of the things I've heard people say about how streaming has ruined TV shows' ability to grow. Because years ago, a lot of shows would grow organically over the years and then eventually become mainstream or have that cult following. A lot of the most popular TV shows weren't immediately popular from the first episode or the first season. And now a lot of shows don't get the time to grow as they're canceled after the first season if they don't immediately become a cultural phenomenon. An issue that's also been pointed out by consumers, artists, and even execs is how oversaturated the industry is. On one hand, I agree, since with social media, more people can create music and put it out than ever before. But then on the other hand, I think the music industry being more decentralized than ever before is a bigger issue than the oversaturation, but to be fair, those two things are definitely linked. Now that people aren't listening to the radio as much anymore or watching the same cable channels, it's harder to push these artists because a lot of us don't get our entertainment from these avenues the industry has more influence over. I'm sure the struggle to break artists is even more worrying now because these major labels are making less money than ever and have way less market share than they used to. In the 2000s, they came up with 360 deals to fix that, and because of the sheer amount of horror stories, a lot of artists just won't sign 360 deals anymore. Many of them don't want to sign with major labels at all. And I think artists deciding to go independent comes as a logical result of it not only being a viable option, but it's also perceived as a safer option based on the horror stories we've heard about some major labels. We've heard so many stories of artists being worked to the bone and still losing money despite being household names. We've heard of artists who don't get to own their creative work and only being given a chance to earn it back after years. We've heard about artists being stuck in predatory contracts. The two names brought up in the article as the last big stars to really break into the industry were Olivia Rodrigo and Ice Spice. Olivia blowing up makes sense to me since she's been performing basically her whole life and was well known from Disney. I think she's really one of the last Disney girls to blow up on a high level, like a Miley, Demi, Selena level. But I think aside from her music, the fact that Olivia's had years of experience performing paid off when she started her career outside of Disney. She also came out of the gate strong with a good lead single as well as strong branding and promo. And that was followed up by a debut album that was actually good and performed well, evidenced by the amount of singles from Sour that charted, as well as a tour. I actually didn't know this, but Olivia was named Time's Entertainer of the Year in 2021, which makes sense because she had such a strong breakout year and was everywhere. Obviously, Olivia Rodrigo and Ice Spice are two very different artists, but I do think there are some commonalities that help them to blow up. Yes, they both had viral songs, but it's also been acknowledged that that's not enough to make someone a star. It's also important that they follow those early viral songs with more hits while they had the momentum, and there wasn't a lot of dead space between the song that went viral and their next release. And also, it's gotta be said, they're both young and attractive. While that's not the be-all end-all, the industry and a lot of consumers are shallow, and we have to be honest that usually helps. Aside from Olivia and Ice Spice's music being everywhere, marketing and branding is everything. If I ask you what mental image you have when you think of Olivia Rodrigo, it's likely her dark hair, something purpley, Y2K inspired. If I ask you the same question for Ice Spice, it's going to be her orange hair, a drill beat maybe, pink Princess Diana imagery, her twerking, or something New York related. A good branding trick I've always heard is that the sign of having a strong brand is if someone could dress up as you or whoever for Halloween and be recognized. Having a strong brand or aesthetic does make an artist more identifiable to the public, and them being familiar with that aesthetic or that artist makes them more inclined to consume that artist's music or at the very least not skip it. In addition, both Olivia Rodrigo and Ice Spice's music is palatable enough for a mainstream artist or to appeal to a large enough demographic, but they still have a distinct enough sound or vibe. But of course, that's not to say everyone is an Olivia Rodrigo or an Ice Spice stan, but clearly enough people are. And I think that's the case for all of the big artists, especially ones that have longevity still or have passed away but we're still talking about them. Like if you think of a Taylor Swift, a Beyonce, a Lana, a Nicki, The Weeknd, Ariana Grande, Drake, Lorde, or even Billie Eilish, just to name people who were huge in the 2010s, there's something specific to them or their music that makes them identifiable. And I know what this boils down to is being unique, at least in some aspects. I'm not saying all artists have to be the deepest person ever or the most alternative or different out there, but being somewhat unique can take you pretty far. Another quote from the Billboard article reads, "There is a need and a desire for new artists that have real substance, artists that are more than just a song that we can really lean into, buy concert tickets, buy merchandise." And I agree with this quote for sure, but I think it goes against the way that labels have been recruiting artists in the recent years, at least from the outside looking in. I'm always for more artists getting pushed to the front who genuinely believe in the music they make and have a unique point of view. But so many major label artists who are unique and do write or produce have a terrible story with a label not wanting them to put their own work out. And it's not just an issue with one label, which I think is why we're seeing the effects of this industry wide. I would be eager to see if labels actually start investing in these artists that have real substance, so to speak, because yeah, that's what they claim they want, but there's obviously financial risk there, and risk they might not want to take if they're not making as much money anymore. But I do think sometimes those risks are very much worth it, but companies being risk averse is why creative industries are feeling so stale these days. It's not because people in 2023 are inherently less talented and creative than people in, say, 1973 or 1993. And as they say, high risk, high reward most of the time. Yes, music is art first and foremost, but in the music industry, the art is also commodified into a business, and you're supposed to be intentional about business if you want to succeed. This is a pretty half-baked thought, but I think more consistent promotion of these artists over in the States would definitely help. Y'all know I'm a K-pop stan, and I think one thing I've noticed the industry does well over there is having consistent, centralized spaces for artists to promote. Like, even if over here in America we had weekly music shows again or things of that nature, I think it would help. One, the artist gets more exposure and more practice consistently performing, and the consumers get more content to consume, even if it's just promotion of the same single. And of course, I'm not saying we don't have any ways for artists to promote in the US, but a lot of them are less universally consumed and more of a, if you know to look for it, it's there sort of thing. Or they're more one-off performances on late night shows or morning news shows and not something that's dedicated entirely to music. And if they exist and I'm missing out, please do put me on. One big drawback that I already know of here is that a lot of the times these things have to be paid for, so it's not necessarily democratic. But I am saying this more in terms of artists signed to major labels rather than independent artists, since it's the major labels who are claiming they have the problem. I think it would even help to bring back those shows like Video Countdown and TRL and all of that. This might be more of a personal thing, but for a while I was completely unaware that TRL even came back in the 2010s and that there were so many episodes and appearances available online. And that kind of goes back to my point, when you look at the other music shows in other countries, a lot of their viewership is way higher and in the hundreds and thousands for almost every performance. So it kind of makes me wonder why these music shows are no longer as successful in the United States. And then on the other hand, I also wonder if they ever became popular again, would that be helpful to these new artists coming up in terms of promotion? And having those more centralized spaces for music obviously doesn't completely take away the fact that people are online. But while people are online, they can reconnect to the mainstream, which is basically the reason these labels are suffering so badly. And since this whole labels are depressed thing blew up on Twitter, I took a look through the comments to see other people's thoughts. Several comments are like me, attributing this in large part to lack of development and chasing after what's popular. Others made the point that consumers are looking for more relatable stars nowadays, and that definitely is a thing. People are disillusioned with a lot of these megastars and crave artists that are seemingly regular people. And it's become a thing where a lot of people dislike artists with clear label input and write them off as industry plants, but then are also kind of upset when an artist isn't properly developed. In the comments, people also made the point that it's not inherently bad to recruit new talent from social media because it is where a lot of independent artists promote themselves. I was actually thinking more about this after the recent release of Addison Rae's EP and the mixed feelings about it. Regardless of those feelings, the EP was streamed over 1 million times on Spotify Premium in its first 24 hours, which obviously are impressive numbers. And that made me think of a tweet I saw where someone was essentially saying, well, these are the numbers that happen when we're waiting for Ari and Gaga and Rihanna and what have you to drop music and stop making makeup. And one, I do think that further proves my earlier point that our biggest pop icons are pretty much the same ones from over a decade ago, and the point that the industry is becoming stagnant. But also, it helped me to finally connect my thoughts together and realize if these labels aren't developing their artists, pushing them, or helping them make connections in a meaningful way, they're not really creating artists who are offering anything more than the quote-unquote TikTok girl, especially one who's been able to use her platform to leverage meaningful industry connections herself. And if labels are keeping on this path of not focusing as much on development and people are just used to getting lukewarm performances across the board, especially compared to the ones we've seen in decades past, people are going to lean towards picking their favorite artists solely based on how their music sounds and not ever take their performance ability into consideration. After all, consumers have no real skin in the game, unlike the label, and will just listen to what's most pleasing to them. And I know that might sound weird to think about, but for example, there have been several times over the years where I knew of an artist and wasn't really interested in their music, but then I saw an award show performance or something like that that got me interested. And if performance quality decreases overall, that's going to be far less likely to happen in the future. And also, if labels are making less money like they say, I feel it could lead to a decrease in production value, especially for artists who aren't the label's flagship artists and aren't already bringing them in a ton of cash. And as I said earlier, if an artist has no reason to think signing with the label will help them, or if the labels aren't pushing out any serious competition, which would give them incentive to improve, they're better off just going it alone and not giving the label access to their work or to their money. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure yet, and I guess no one is sure where this is going to lead in the future, what changes are going to be made, and how quickly they'll be made, and what we'll notice. I don't know if record labels will ever return to the height that they were at decades before, and on that front, I am pretty doubtful. But if the major labels are intending to not close up shop, it's pretty obvious that some major restructuring does need to go on. And I do think if the music execs and the higher ups at the label are serious about addressing a lot of the issues they outlined in the Billboard article, within due time, we will see a difference in how these labels approach, sign, and recruit these artists, and also a reevaluation of what exactly these labels are doing for these artists. And, hopefully eventually from that comes actual development again into, an artist, a singer, an entertainer, a performer, honestly, something just other than someone with a viral song and a microphone. And that's not to say that I'm like a major label stan or anything, because I'm all for being an independent artist if that's what works for you. And in a lot of cases, it does seem like that's the better option. But I am saying, like, if these major labels are going to recruit artists nowadays, you need to actually do for them what you're saying you're going to do for them and actually show them a benefit of working with them and taking their money potentially. But yeah, like I said, I know a lot of this investment and recruitment and development. I know that that's a money thing and sometimes it's easier said than done. But sometimes if you want things to work out, you got to risk it to get the biscuit. But yeah, as always, do let me know what you think down in the comments. I know this is a conversation, like I've said, we've sort of been having across several videos now, and this was more just like a fast and loose, like me putting together my thoughts on the topic because of research and consuming a lot of music. I do have thoughts, and again, I'm eager to hear yours, so make sure you put them down below. That way we can continue this conversation. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. Also, make sure you follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with me there. And if you'd like to become a channel member, the link is in the video description. Again, thank you so very much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.